Hello everyone. So let's begin for 24/7/2018 the Hindu analysis. The first news item, Alwar fallout, the government panel to check the cases of mob lynching. By now you should have got updated to what is mob lynching. It was associated with the fake news and which was being spread through WhatsApp. So taking this into consideration to curb the issue at the earliest, a high level committee has been set up by the particular government and it would be headed by Rajiv Gawab. So he is a person who would be heading and he would be checking the cases of the mob lynching. And once a case or the report has been ready, he has to submit to the group of ministers, which would be headed by the minister, that's a union home minister, and then the submission of the recommendations would be forwarded to prime minister. And you should also know one more thing, that the police and public order are the state subjects. So mob lynching has been a part of the police and the public order because the state government is the one which has to control the crimes and maintaining the law and order of that particular state and also protect the life and property of the citizens. So this is one sort of an improvement to what you have seen in the mob lynching, the first news item. Second news item, medical tourists flocking to India. So this is with respect to the medical tourisms. So there is a rare combination, advanced facilities, skilled doctors and a low cost of a treatment is the reason behind India attracting a large number of foreign patients every year. So which means that this is pertaining to the large number of foreign patients who are landing up India, and that is with respect to the combinations to what we have as in advanced facilities, then we have a low cost treatment and the skilled doctors. And most of the people who come are from Bangladesh and Afghanistan, and they continue to be the top countries from there, the maximum number of the foreign tourist arrival. That's for the medical purposes. And other countries apart from Bangladesh and Afghanistan, there were Iraq, Oman, Maldives, Yemen, Uzbekistan and Sudan. And now the Niti Aayog has identified the medical value travel as a major source of foreign exchange earnings. So Niti Aayog is trying to understand like how valued is a medical travel, and so that how they can turn it into a source of the foreign exchange earnings. And it has been estimated that by 2020, India's medical tourism industry could be worth of almost $9 billion and account for 20% of the global market share. So this is in the span of another 2 years, this is what we see India when it comes to the medical tourisms. So this is about it. And the next one, PM in Africa amid a fallen trade. So this is with respect to India-Africa relations. So recently the Prime Minister, he visited 3 African nations to boost the India-Africa bilateral relations, and this is an engagement with respect to increased over the last 4 years, which means that the African nations engagement with India has been increased from the last 4 years. But however, there is also a kind of an study which tells that the India and Africa relations has been declining. So according to the World Investment Report 2018, that's the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, India FDI in Africa in 2016-17 was 14 billion, which is lower than 16 billion at the year 2011 and 12. So here a kind of a comparison is happening between the year 2011 and 12 to the year 2016 and 17. It's almost having a lag of $2 billion. So this is one of the kind of an reports which tells that there is a decline. And India and Chinese investment were same with respect to 2011 and 12 at 16 billion. So again they're comparing with India and China having a simultaneous look up to the Africa. So but Chinese investment has increased to 40 billion in 2016 and 17. So India's has been fallen to 14 billion, wherein China's has got increased and doubled or tripled with almost like 40 billion in 2016 and 17. So this is a slight comparison with respect to United Nations Conference on Trade and Development report between India and China with respect to Africa. The issues is that India's trade remained concentrated to the east part of the Africa only. So why is that we are been having a dip with respect to the India-Africa relations, or why is it not going further, is because of India has always been concentrating on the east part of the Africa, and trade is majorly dominated by the petroleum products which need diversifications. So these are the 2 important issues to why it's been declined, and you have the charts out here. So yellow one is for import and export is the green one. So you can just look on to these part. That's about it. The next one, the banks agreed to resolve the stressed assets quickly. So this is with respect to the intercreditor agreement ICA. So there are 24 public, private and foreign banks have signed an intercreditor agreements to resolve distressed assets. So basically they're talking about the NPS, non-performing assets. The move comes after the RBI has dismantled all the existing resolution mechanism such as Joint Lenders Forum in its 12th February circular. So even before getting adapted to the inter-creditor agreement, the banks, they used to follow something called as in joint lenders, and this joint lender is now not been a success forum. That's the reason the inter-credit agreement has come into existence, and the RBI has actually asked the lenders, that's nothing but the banks and the NBFs, to start a resolution for the assets if the default was even by one day. So they're telling that even if you should first know what is default with respect to the lenders. So you're the person who had taken the amount and they don't repay the amount, and that becomes as an NPA, non-performing assets, and how fast you come up with a solution to resolve it is what is the resolution for the assets which has to be done. So RBI has asked the lenders to start resolution for the assets even if the default is by one particular day, and it has also mandated that if the resolution plan was not finalized within 180 days, the account had to be referred to the bankruptcy proceedings. So by within 180 days, if the resolution has not been done, which means that it has to move on for the next procedure called as in bankruptcy. So inter-creditor agreement was framed under the aegis of the Indian Bank Association, and it follows the recommendation of Sunil Mehta Committee on the Stressed Asset Resolution. So whatever we have with respect to the intercredit agreement, this was a kind of a framework under the aegis of the Indian Bank of Association and on the recommendations of Sunil Mehta Committee. So both the bank and NBFC could be a part of the ICA, and here ICA would primarily focus the corporate sectors, which would be more than 50 crore to 500 crores and 500 crores to 2000 crores category. So based on these categories, they would be resolving them at the earliest. So here you have the informations to it. So what is an ICA and how will it work? First one is ICA, that's the intercreditor agreement, is an agreement among the banks that have dues from a borrower in stress. The pact mandates the lead bank to formulate a resolution plan that will be executed in a time-bound manner. And the applicability, as we just did it, all the corporate loans above 50 crores. And binding condition is that if 66% or 2/3 of the lenders in terms of an aggregate exposure approve, then the pact is binding on all the lenders. Because remember, we just did about the joint lenders. So this particular joint lenders was with respect to consensus, so which means that all the banks have to give the consent and then they have to go ahead with the certain procedures. But here with respect to binding, if out of 24 banks, if 66% shares has been there and if they have to agree to it, this is what the resolution to we have for the pertaining problem, they can go ahead. It's not like for 100% should be as in consensus. That is not been there. And they have something called as an exit option. So this is with respect to the dissenting lenders will have an exit route, either selling their exposure at a discount or buying an exposure the other lenders at the premium. If any of them are not okay with respect to the ICA, then which means that the lenders can exit from that option. So who is it? We have is like 24 banks including the SBI, Bank of India and Corporation Bank have already signed up. A majority of the lenders are expected to follow suit by the end of the week. Some NBFCs may also come on the board. So this is a developments again which we will have to wait and see. So these are the ones, so these are the people who would be a part of this particular ICA. So this is about it. We'll see what are the functions of ICA. First and foremost, ICA is applicable to all corporate borrowers who have availed the loans for an amount of rupees 50 crore or more under the consortium lending multiple banking arrangements, and the lender with the highest exposure to the stressed borrower will be authorized to formulate the resolution plan which will be presented to all lenders for their approval. So the decision making shall be by a way of approval of majority lenders, that as we discussed, the lenders with 66% share in the aggregate exposure. And once a resolution plan is approved by the majority, it shall be binding on all the lenders at the party of the ICA. And dissenting lenders can either sell their exposure to another lender at a 15% discount or buy the entire exposure of all the banks involved at 25% premium. So this is only thing which is actually a drawback of ICA, because they even have like a deep discount which has been allowed. So if deep discount is being given to sell up with those particular asset, would again be a hit to the banks. So this is only concern right now. One of the major concerns with the ICA is to achieve the consensus among the lending banks on what have to be a common resolution plan which would have benefited the banks. So this is again connected to the above part. So the entire points are here to whatever we discussed right now. This is about it. The next news item, Karnataka sees 300% jump in the FDI inflows, Tamil Nadu rebounds. So this is with respect to the foreign direct investment inflow. Karnataka has been registered as the biggest increase in the FDI last year, and it sees almost like 300% jump in the FDI inflows, and Tamil Nadu FDI inflows have also been increased. But there are 3 states which have actually seen the drop. It's Gujarat, Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. So apart from that, you have certain details being posted out here, and we have like boosted by high FDI in the software and hardware sector in the year 2017-18. Karnataka has attracted a high FDI inflow than previous years, and this particular graph is showing a details with respect to 16-17 and also 17 and 18. So just have a look onto it, and here you have the sectors and the FDI inflows with dollar millions. The second news item, the next news item, Iran becomes India's number 2 oil supplier. So this is with respect to surge in oil imports from Iran. So Iran was the second biggest supplier to the Indian state refineries between April and June, and India is Iran's top client after China. So after China, India is Iran's top client, and state refiners accounting for almost like 60% of India's 5 million BPD refining capacity had curbed imports from Iran last year. And this was done with respect to the protest which had happened with respect to Tehran's move to grant the development rights for the giant Farzad B gas field to other parties. So which is again being connected with the rest. And however, the recent surge to whatever is happening right now is with respect to the tolerant offering almost a free shipping and extended credit periods on the oil sales. And India and the other major buyers of the Iranian oil are under the pressure to cut the imports from the country after Washington in May withdrew from a 2005 nuclear deal with Tehran and decided to reimpose the sanctions on the OPEC members. This might force India to look for the other alternatives which may result in increased oil prices. So this is with respect to the India and Iran and the oil prices which connected to them. Just a development again. So the next news item, India slips 3 ranks in 80 Kearney's FDI confidence index, that is out of top 10. So we have the index which will be brought up by the American Global Management, which is a consulting firm, and here we have like top 10 destinations for the FDI in terms of its attractiveness. So that's the index is all about, and this year India has been in the 11th position, not under top 10. So in the year 2017 they were in the 8th position, in the year 2016 they were under the 9th position, and they have been fallen down, and the reason behind is with respect to the GST and also the demonetization which has been implemented in the year 2016 and 17 respectively. So this is one of the reasons to why the FDI particular confidence index has dropped down and India is in the 11th position and not made the list under the top. It also highlighted the several notable reforms such as removing the Foreign Investment Promotion Board, we call it as FIPB, and liberalizing the FDI limits in key sectors. So these were the other 2 important findings associated with the FDI confidence index. So stating as a reason to why it has been fallen down. So that's about it. And next we have is the short spells of heavy showers. So it's about the mini clouds burst are increasing in India. Mini cloud bursts are increasing in India. A mini cloud burst is defined as a rainfall in excess of 50 mm in a 2 consecutive hours. So in 2 consecutive hours, if you have more than 50 mm of rainfall, which means that we call it as a mini cloud burst, and the term was coined by the scientists at Pune's Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology due to an increase in heavy rainfall to the short durations during the summer monsoon in India. And the researchers have also found that average of 200 mini cloud bursts occurring every year in India. So every year in India we have an average of almost like 200 mini cloud burst which happens, and the study found that the mini cloud bursts are very common in the foothills of the Himalayas. So it's very common when it comes to the belt of Himalayas, and the west coast also records more than 3 mini cloud bursts per season, and the Indo-Gangetic plains and the Saurashtra region receive 2 per season. So again we have Rajasthan and states to the east and Western Ghats experience the least number of the mini cloudburst. So very lesser compared to this particular states and the Ghats. For the rest of the India, the amount of the rainfall per mini cloudburst is around 50 to 70 mm. So we have the Indian Meteorological Department, which have recognized the cloud burst, that is heavy rainfall in the mountainous regions of Himalayas. So in contrast, the mini cloud bursts are indicative of torrential downpour but of the lower intensive than the cloud burst. So presently the IMD classifies the rainfall as heavy with respect to over 60.5 mm, very heavy is over 130 mm, and extremely heavy is over with respect to 200 mm. So as per to whatever we have discussed right now, the mini cloudburst, India is almost having a record of 200 mini cloudburst in a year, but right now we have exceeded with almost like 50 mm. So 50 mm means it is under the category of the heavy rainfall as heavy, which is almost this year we have termed it as 60.5 mm. And to be called it as very heavy, it's 130, and very extremely heavy, we call it as 200 mm. So this is about the mini cloudburst. The next one we have is changing the order of battle. So here we have summit diplomacy, and the diplomacy is one of the world's old professions. So however, this has been replaced by the summit level diplomacy in comparatively a recent phenomenon which has been started after the Second World War. The first instance was when the Chamberlain took a trip to visit Hitler in 1938. So this is with respect to back in 1938 when Chamberlain had taken a visit to Hitler. At that point itself, they have come for us diplomacy. That's a diplomacy had been taken care. So one of the most important event of the summit level diplomacy is at the Yalta conference, which features Ms. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and the Prime Minister of British Winston Churchill and the Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin. So however, after the post-war era, there is a traditional diplomacy was prevalent, but in recent time we have come up with a new sort of a diplomacy, and we call it as in summit level diplomacy have come into the pictures. That's it has taken a rebirth again. Silent features of the summit style diplomacy. So foreign office and ministers in charge of the foreign affairs are being pushed into the background. First and foremost, the foreign officers and the foreign affairs ministers would be taking place when it comes to the diplomacy areas, and leaders engaged in the summit diplomacy are not unduly constrained by the need of the adherer to the Westphalian order. And in summit level diplomacy, the leaders took the diplomatic steps in their own personal beliefs only, but they ignored the past history and also the current problems. To whatever they felt as a personal belief can really help up with respect to taking our diplomatic steps, to that is what the most of the leaders are doing right now. And we have like one important thing, the meeting between Mr. Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore in mid-June, a classic example of the daredevilry at the highest levels. So the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru back then, who was in effect his own Minister for External Affairs, also conducted a policy discussions with a whole range of world leaders, achieving a mixed bag of results. So he was also successful as the architect of the NAM, that's a non-aligned movement, but met with setbacks in his China policy. So again, to what they have done back when Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru was there, what kind of an issues he has been sorted with respect to the summit level diplomacy. In 1988, we have the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, who ended a 25-year India-China stalemate by personally taking the initiative to reopen the talks with the Xi Jinping and the Chinese leadership. And we also have Mr. Vajpayee achieved a temporary respite from the cross-border attacks from Pakistan by engaging with General, later President Pervez Musharraf. So again, this is which happened at the time of Mr. Vajpayee. And Prime Minister Modi in its informal summits, this is about the latest one, informal summits had recently with Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin have contributed to improving the varying relations with China and Russia. So here the summit diplomacy shows a positive results in area where the traditional diplomacy has always been struggled for years to achieve, where they have been a long lasting or a short lived. So this with respect to how faster you have been sorting an issue with respect to either ending up with a war or with a peace. But right now this summit diplomacy is being ending up with a positive results to whatever we just discussed is about the positive outcomes of the summit level diplomacies, which has been there. And if diplomacy is generally viewed as a war by the other means, then summit diplomacy is changing the order of the battle in a bid to succeed where all else have failed. So whatever else has been failed in the past, there's one thing which can be done is the submit diplomacies and get sorted out with the issues. So this is about it, silent features. And the question for the day is the group of ministers, you have to just brief on them. Secondly, you have to spot the Iran and the countries bordering it. So these were the important news items for 24/7/2018. Thank you.